Good afternoon. Welcome back to God Speaks. I'm your host and teacher, Marquita Brooks. Last week, I told you guys I was going to do a message on Purim for the body of believers on today, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We are still preparing for Ecclesia 2020, which is this weekend. It starts this Friday at 7:30 p.m. We'll be with Congregation Zion's Sake during their Purim Shabbat service. Purim is actually next week. Purim starts Monday sundown, Monday the 9th, at sundown to Tuesday on the 10th, March 10th. That's when Purim is. And we'll actually look at the biblical calendar dates in a moment because we're going to go through the book of Esther to really understand what the Lord is saying to us right now and really position ourselves to be the body of believers, to rise up like Esther in this moment because God is calling us to do so. And so I'm going to take you to quite a few scriptures. But remember, this is all in preparation for what the Lord wants to do through us this weekend at Ecclesia 2020 Focus Tideward Ecclesia. Each year, the Truth in the Spirit hosts an Ecclesia gathering. We have an annual gathering. The first annual gathering we ever had was in 2007 at World Outreach Worship Center. Now here we are in 2020, 13 years later, and we're about to have another annual gathering at World Outreach. Our biggest one, I think, was in 2009 at World Outreach. We had another one a couple of years after, which was amazing at World Outreach. And so the ones that we have at World Outreach Worship Center tend to be tremendously anointed, and there's a reason for that. Congregation Zion's Sake serves as the covering for the Truth in the Spirit, and World Outreach Worship Center is the ministry out of which Congregation Zion's Sake was birthed. Rabbi Carlson actually used to be a member at Wow Center, and I've heard Pastor Collins, God rest him, speak so many times about that Rabbi Carlson was a member there at Wow Center first before God birthed Congregation Zion's Sake through him. And Wow Center has been just a tremendous blessing to us under Pastor Collins. Pastor Collins was just like a spiritual grandfather to me, as Rabbi Carlson is a spiritual father. And Pastor Evenson has just been a tremendous blessing, just taking over that leadership as when Pastor Collins retired and continuing the legacy since Pastor Collins' death. And so just bless God for both ministries, Congregation Zion's Sake and World Outreach Worship Center, who have a beautiful covenant relationship that show what it's supposed to look like when the church and the Messianic community come together, because we're all as one. The church, the Messianic community, that's the body of believers. We're all the body of Messiah. And so it's very important that we come together, and World Outreach Worship Center and Congregation Zion's Sake have a beautiful covenant relationship that demonstrates that. And I praise the Lord that the Truth in the Spirit has been blessed by that relationship through both ministries. And so we'll be back there this weekend at World Outreach Worship Center. The first night, this Friday night, March 6th at 7:30 p.m., we'll be joining Congregation Zion's Sake for the Purim Shabbat service. Now, remember I told you Purim is next week. So this service is just prior to Purim to kind of prepare us for it. And we're going to look at the significance of Purim and what the Lord is saying to us this year through Purim. I've been talking about it a lot. I talked about it at last worship service on Saturday. I talked about it last week on God Speaks, but I'm going to really get into it today so we can see some significance here. And so this Friday at 7:30 at Zion's Sake Purim Shabbat service, there's going to be a creative rendition of the book of Esther to really understand the Feast of Purim, which was developed in the book of Esther. We see it being established during that time. And there's also an exhortation about how we should respond at this point. And those of us who are participating in Ecclesia 2020, you really want to be there for the Purim services Friday at 7:30 with Zion's Sake, because the Lord is starting us with an alignment with his kingdom. That's the very first thing we're doing in Ecclesia 2020 is aligning with the kingdom of God. And the very first thing that needs to happen to align with his kingdom is to connect with Israel, because he set apart the nation of Israel to really reveal himself to the world. So if you want to know who God is and you want to connect with his kingdom, you've got to connect with Israel. There is no going around that. There's no way to exclude Israel. There's no way to cut Israel off and still be connected to the kingdom. The only way to connect to the kingdom of God is to go through Israel. That is his entry point on earth. Literally, Jerusalem is his seat of authority in the earth realm. There's a Jerusalem that is below and a Jerusalem that is above, and the Jerusalem on earth connects the natural and spiritual authority of Messiah Yeshua, who of course is a Jew. Now, it's important that we get that. I talked about it last Friday on the Word Revealed. That was a powerful Word Revealed. If you didn't watch it, make sure you watch it, because it wasn't just a revelation of the scriptures. There was a lot of prophetic revelation coming forth during that Word Revealed. So you want to watch that one. But also, you want to understand that the Lord is doing some amazing things at this time. And so when we come to the Purim service on Friday night, he is aligning the body of believers, particularly Christians, the church, with his kingdom to bring us into full alignment. And that starts with connecting with Israel, standing with Israel, being one with the Messianic community, because together that is the body of believers, the church and the Messianic community. That is the body of Messiah. And so you want to do that on Friday. I want to make you aware that it's a very festive occasion, the celebration of Purim. And so what you want to know is that at Zion's sake, many members of the congregation will be wearing costumes, because Esther's identity was hidden in the book of Esther. You'll remember, as you look at the book of Esther, which we'll be looking at today, that Esther is a Jew. Her family is a Jew. They're Benjamites, and which means they're from the tribe of Benjamin, just like King Saul was, which is very significant. We'll look at that in a minute. When the nation of Israel split into the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, they split because, remember, we talked about this on Friday, Solomon had 700 wives, 300 concubines, and they brought their idols into the kingdom. When they brought their idols in, the Lord had to protect the sanctity of his presence in Jerusalem. So he actually split 10 northern tribes away from the 2 southern tribes. Now, if you don't count the tribe of Levi, which is the priests, the ministers that minister to everybody, and you count Joseph as 2 tribes from his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, then you got 10 tribes to the north, and then you got Judah and Benjamin remaining in the south. Because when you look at the map of the 12 tribes, Judah is here and Benjamin's territory is here, including the Negev. And so all of that southern area of Judah and Benjamin became what was called the nation of Judah. And then the 10 tribes to the north were called the nation of Israel during the split. And you'll see that when we go through the Word Revealed, and we start to look at 1st and 2nd Kings, you're going to see that split, and you're going to understand, the division of the kingdom for quite a few years. Now, the Levites, who were spread throughout Israel, realized that King Jeroboam was going to, he created 2 golden calves, put one in Dan, which was the northernmost part of Israel, and he put one in Bethel, which was right near the border to Jerusalem, or border to Judah. Now, the reason this was important that he did that, because his goal was to keep people from going back to Judah to worship in the temple. He didn't want them to go to Jerusalem to worship on Shabbat, to worship on the annual feast, to worship on Rosh Hashanah. He wanted to make sure they stayed in the northern kingdom, because he was trying to keep control of his kingdom. We're going to talk about that on Saturday at Ecclesia, because that's an important message for us in the body of believers, what Jeroboam did. He created a completely different religious system with 2 golden calves, one in Dan, one in Bethel. And he told the people in those 10 northern tribes, don't go back to the temple in Judah to worship. Don't go to Jerusalem. Worship these golden calves, because this is the God who brought you out of Egypt. Now, of course, we know that's not true. They had already gotten in trouble for that with the golden calf in the desert, when the Lord has commanded not to make a graven image. And so they actually went into idolatrous worship. It was no longer worshiping Yahweh. And the Levites left, because Jeroboam, this new king of the northern kingdom, would not allow them to minister to Yahweh, the God of the Bible. So the Levites left, and they joined Judah. So now the nation of Judah, people who we call Jews today, come from 3 tribes. They come from the tribe of Judah. They come from the tribe of Benjamin, like Esther and Mordecai. And they come from the tribe of Levi, like they're Cohens. Like you'll see people with the last name Cohen or Khan. That means they're Levites. They come from the tribe of Levi. They're priests. Those 3 tribes actually make up Judah. So when we call a person a Jew, we're talking about those 3 tribes. If they're from any of the other tribes, they're Israelites. Now, in today's day and age. Now, this is important for us to understand, because Esther is a Jew. She's from the tribe of Benjamin. She's a Jew. So when the northern kingdom goes into exile in Assyria, Judah stays in the land for some time longer. But later on, Judah goes into exile as well, into Babylon. Babylon then gets captured by Medo-Persia, because the Babylonian Empire does not repent and turn back to God. They had a beautiful opportunity to do it. Nebuchadnezzar witnessed all these great miracles through Daniel, the three Hebrew boys, all these miracles of Yahweh, even when he lost his mind and became like an animal, and then God restored his mind. And he gives glory to God, but he does not remove the idolatry from his nation. And his son and his grandson continue the idolatry. And so eventually the Lord allows Babylon to be taken over by Medo-Persia. Medo-Persia takes over. That's two kingdoms, Media and Persia, who unite against Babylon. They take over Babylon in a night. We see that in the book of Daniel with the writing on the wall. That very night, Medo-Persia comes in and takes over. When we get to the book of Esther, the Persian king Xerxes gets rid of his wife Vashti, and he starts to look for another bride. Esther is a part of the group of exiles that came from Judah into Babylon, which is now Medo-Persia. So this is how she gets to this location. She's not in Judah. She's in the empire of Medo-Persia that took over Babylon because Babylon brought Judah into exile. Now, at this point in history, some Jews had returned back to Judah because Cyrus, King Cyrus, a king that preceded Xerxes, had allowed the Jews to return back to Judah, rebuild the temple, and it was prophesied in Isaiah. We read all this in the word revealed that King Cyrus would do that. Esther is still in Persia, possibly because Mordecai had a very important post in the Persian king's court. He was a scribe. And so it's possible that Mordecai chose to stay in Persia rather than going back to Judah because of his post in the kingdom, which meant he was in influence. And that's important. If you want the empire to continue to retain the blessings of God, there's got to be counselors who serve God that are in the court of the king. And so it's possible that Mordecai felt, his duty was to stay in Persia. But, scripture doesn't tell us what happened or why it happened. But for whatever reason, Mordecai and Esther have not gone back to Judah. It's a long, long trip. People get killed and robbed on the way. And so it's a dangerous trip. When you get there, you got to start your life all over. And so it's possible he didn't want to put Esther through the danger, considering her parents had already been killed. She's an orphan. We see that in chapter 2. And so he, being her older cousin, is actually taking care of her. He raises her like his own. And then when the king has gotten rid of his wife, he's gotten rid of Vashti, his wife, because she refused to come before him when he was having a party of drunken men. She's like, I'm not coming before these guys. So he puts her away, meaning she can no longer come to my presence. Now I need a new queen. And he sends and looks for beautiful virgins throughout his empire that can be a part of his harem, and he's going to choose one to be queen. This is where Esther comes into the scene. Now, her original name is Hadassah. You see that in verse 7 of Esther chapter 2. Her name is Hadassah. But her uncle Mordecai tells her that she should, it says he's actually her older cousin. But we often say he's her uncle, but he's her older cousin because she is his uncle's daughter. Esther is Mordecai's uncle's daughter, and that's who died. Her father and mother died. And so Mordecai raises her like his own daughter. He's, it's an older man. And when she is taken to be a part of this harem of the king of Persia, Xerxes, her uncle or her older cousin Mordecai tells her, listen, Jews are not in the best position in the Persian Empire right now. So it's best that they don't know that you're a Jew, especially if you want to have favor and you want to be treated well in the palace, because he's not going to be able to look out for her, and he knows that. Everybody knows he's a Jew. He's been very vocal about being a Jew, but she's a young woman. Nobody's really seen her in the community. When she goes to the palace, she's going to be well known. He says, let's give you a new name. We're going to give you the name of Esther, and pretend that you're just Babylonian, that you were part of the Babylonian culture when Persia took it over. Babylonian name, you are Esther. So now she goes into the king's court, and she's Esther rather than Hadassah. In the king's court, she learns the things she needs to learn. She gets beauty treatment so that she can actually be prepared to be a queen who doesn't offend the king in any way. And all of this becomes very important, that as you're looking at it, Esther is sort of immersed into Persian culture. She's a Jew, but she's immersed into Persian culture. Now, as she's immersed into Persian culture, again, no one knows that she's a Jew, so her identity is hidden. This is why on Friday, I said all that to say, on Friday, when we come to Purim service with Congregation Zion's Sake, you'll see many of the members of the ministry dressed in costumes because Esther's identity is hidden from most of the book of Esther. Now, it's important that we get that because her identity is being hidden so that she can receive favor and be in a good position. And so they're going to dress as biblical characters or other nice, fun characters, nothing demonic, nothing evil. So if you want to dress in costume this Friday, feel free to do so. But also, you don't have to. Some people are just going to wear their regular clothes. Like it's up to you. If you come this Friday to be a part of Ecclesia for the first night at 7:30, as we align with the Kingdom of God and we look at the significance of Purim, you can wear a costume like Esther, whose identity was revealed later, or you can wear just the regular clothes that you would wear for service. There's no dress code at Zion's sake. Some people wear suits and ties. Some people wear jeans and t-shirts. It's up to you. The Truth and Spirit is the same way. We don't have any type of dress code. And so dress as you feel comfortable, but join us because this story of Esther is going to be shared even more. Her story is going to be revealed. And so to go back to her story, let's talk about the significance of it here and why this is important to us as believers. She is now in the household of the king. She's in the king's court. She's in his harem. And he chooses her as queen. She wins his favor, possibly because Israel is very family oriented. If you guys know, I have been teaching on this for a long, long time. We've been talking about the family model for ministry. We've been talking about what we can learn from Israel about family and building families. Even Mordecai taking in his orphaned younger cousin and raising her. She is raised to be a lady. She's raised to be an educated woman. She's raised to be a woman of standing. Like she literally is queen material. And that's just because of what has been passed down to her through her family. Even in the midst of the exile, the children of Israel did not lose what God had put into them as a community. And this is so important that we get that because that's been true for the thousands of years that Jews have existed on the earth. That God placed something in Israel and it's been passed on from generation to generation verbally. Now, many things are recorded for our benefit, praise Yahweh. But when it comes to family history and culture and understanding the character of God and aligning with him and his kingdom and his ways and submitting to him, that's passed on by families. Even observing the Torah, observing the Tanakh, which is the Torah, the law of Moses, the Nevi'im, the prophets, the Ketuvim, all the other writings in the Old Testament, the Old Covenant, or the Hebrew Holy Scriptures. When Jews are learning that, it's really learned in a family situation. And this is why the Truth and Spirit does what we do. We do everything in community. Though we could just observe certain things in our homes, we do almost everything. Rosh Hashanah we observe in our homes unless Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbat. Then we observe it together. But everything else we do as a community. And we do it as a community so you can learn with us as a community. It's easy to kind of read the scriptures and hear what the Lord is saying to do, but it's much harder to put it into practice when you've never seen it done, when you never experienced it. Serving the Lord and obeying his commandments is something that's learned in family. And so we see that Esther is wise. She is stately. She is educated. She's the type of woman that makes a good queen. And this is why she wins favor with the king. And so she's put into this position of queen. Now, she's immersed in Persian culture. She's immersed now in the palace lifestyle. Her name has been changed from Hadassah to Esther to hide her identity. And literally, she starts to forget who she is. Now, this can happen to any one of us. You know, we're in a certain community. We grow up in a certain community, and then maybe we get some great position. We accumulate wealth, we build businesses, status, reputation for ourselves, and maybe we move away from that community and we can become somewhat disassociated from our community. She still loved her community. She still had connection with her older cousin Mordecai, but she's not living like the rest of the Jews in Persia anymore. She's in a place of favor and wealth and influence, where before this time she wasn't. And so her life is not the life of a typical Jew in the Persian Empire at this point. Now, while she is becoming immersed in Persian Empire, something else is happening in the court of the king, a man named Haman is also coming into a place of influence and power in the Persian Empire. Now, it tells us in Esther chapter 3 that Haman was an Agagite. It says that in verse 1. He was an Agagite. Now, you need to understand what that means, that he was an Agagite. I got to go back through history and tell you some stuff. You can go backwards a little bit, okay? So keep your thumb there on Esther chapter 3. Haman the Agagite is coming into power and position. But let's go back, and we want to go to 1 Samuel. In 1 Samuel, we see that the first king of Israel, Saul, he's been set apart by the prophet Samuel, and God is using him as king, as his hand of judgment, as God's hand of judgment against the enemies in the land, to protect Israel, keep Israel safe, and to establish a kingdom that operates on the earth as the Lord operates in the heavenly realm. That was the point. However, King Saul does not do everything the way the Lord tells him to do it. There's some stuff he does the way he wants to do it, and you'll see that he fears the people more than he fears God. He's concerned more about his own reputation than he is about being obedient. And for this reason, the kingdom is ripped away from him. Now, let's look at this last thing that he does that the Lord did not tell him to do, or that he didn't do it the way the Lord told him to do it. And because of that, the Lord tells him through the prophet Samuel that he's going to lose kingdom. So here we are in 1 Kings chapter 15. Now, in verse 3, Samuel comes to Saul and he gives him the next mission from Yahweh, from God. This is the mission. In verse 3, it says, now go and attack Amalek. Completely destroy everything they have. Don't spare them, but kill men and women, children and babies, cows and sheep, camels and donkeys. He says kill everybody among the Amalekites. Now this is very important that we get this, because you'll say, why was God so unmerciful? Well, if you're reading the word revealed and you've been watching those videos, the Lord said very clearly in Deuteronomy chapter 25 verse 17, starting in verse 17, why they're supposed to be merciless concerning the Amalekites. Watch this. Verse 17 says, remember what Amalek did to you on the road as you were coming out of Egypt. How he met you by the road, attacked those in the rear, those who were exhausted and straggling behind when you were tired and weary. He did not fear God. Verse 19 of Deuteronomy 25. Therefore, when Adonai your God is giving you rest from all your surrounding enemies in the land Adonai your God is giving you as your inheritance to possess, you are to blot out all memory of Amalek from under heaven. Don't forget. Now that was a commandment in the Torah. It's Deuteronomy chapter 25, verses 17 through 19, which we recently read in the Word Revealed. So if you're watching the Word Revealed, you already read that. So you understand why the Lord in 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 3, sends Samuel to Saul, to King Saul, to say, get rid of all the Amalekites and everything they own. Like literally they were supposed to be treated like Jericho. Remember Jericho in Joshua chapter 6 was supposed to be completely destroyed because it was a stronghold in the land. The Amalekites are another stronghold, a stronghold of terror, of violence, of preying on the weak, the elderly, the sick, the infirm, children, babies, the weary. Anybody that they feel is unprotected, if there's any open door, they will just come in, kill, steal, and destroy. Like literally, they are being completely controlled by the enemy. Now, who are these Amalekites? Well, you gotta go back to Genesis chapter 36, and you will see in verse 12, under the descendants of Esau, who was the twin brother of Jacob, we see that he had all these different wives, all these different descendants. And we see one of his sons was Eliphaz. You see that in verse 10. Then in verse 11, it says the sons of Eliphaz were Teman, Omar, Zepho, Jatam, and Kenaz. Now, Timnah was a concubine of Eliphaz, Esau's son, and she bore to Eliphaz Amalek. That is in verse 12. So the Amalekites are distant cousins of the Israelites. And they hate the Israelites. And they are just raiders. They are just marauders. They attack any weak person they can attack. Now, Saul, going back to 1 Samuel chapter 15, does not kill all the Amalekites. And we know he doesn't kill all the Amalekites because later on, after David is anointed by Samuel to be king, but then Saul tries to kill him, and David has to run away. David runs to the Philistine territory, and while he is away preparing for battle, the Amalekites come and they take all of his family, all of his men's families. They destroy the little village that they had in Ziklag. This is in 1 Samuel chapter 30. The Amalekites came and they took everybody away, the women, the children, because that's all was left. All the men were off with David preparing for war. While the men were gone, the Amalekites came into Ziklag, burned the city down, and took all the women, the children, and all the stuff, took them captive, and kept going. And that's what the Amalekites do. They say, oh, a city with no men, let's take it captive. Just horrible people. And that could never have even happened in 1 Samuel chapter 30 if Saul had done what God told him to do in 1 Samuel chapter 15. But he doesn't. Remember, Saul is the first king of Israel. He's a Benjamite from the tribe of Benjamin, just like Esther. Here we see in verse 8, talking about what Saul did to the Amalekites. It says, he took Agag, the king of Amalek, alive, but he completely destroyed the people, putting them to the sword. So he killed everybody except the king. So now when we get back to Esther, chapter 3, verse 1, it says Haman is an Agagite. We realize Haman is descended from Amalek, particularly Agag, the king of the Amalekites, whom Saul left alive. He's alive. Haman is alive with this vengeance, this hatred for Jews, because Saul almost destroyed all of his people. But remember what I said. They already had a hatred for Jews because they were marauding and killing and raiding and robbing since the Jews came out of Egypt, which the Lord said in Deuteronomy 25. Point being, they've always had a hatred of Jews. And I talked about this. There's a particular sermon that I preached. You can go back on the YouTube channel or on the Facebook page. It's called Temple Service, These and Those. And I talk about why people hate Jews. God promised to bless Israel no matter where he sent them in the world. And no matter what's happening in the world, there's a distinction between Jews and Gentiles. God's hand is upon Jews. And people see it, they get jealous of it, and they start to hate the Jews rather than seeking God for his blessing. Instead of being jealous and hating the blessing that's on the Jews, people could just seek the same God of the Jews, the God of the Bible, for his blessing. That's his way. We see that in Genesis chapter 12, verses 2 and 3, where we see this beautiful promise that God will bless those who bless the descendants of Abraham and curse those who curse the descendants of Abraham. But through Abraham, all the families of the earth will be blessed. Why? Because he released the family model into Abraham. So now Abraham becomes the father of the faith. And so we get this beautiful family model, which really is a picture of God himself. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. One, three as one in the heavenly realm. The family is a picture of God. And as we learn through the biblical models and the examples through Israel how to really build families, we can build nations. We can model ourselves after the kingdom of God. We can submit to him as our heavenly Father, understanding that he loves us, but he does discipline us. See, there's a beautiful balance there when you see him as Father. When you see him as judge, when you see him as king, there is fear, but you may not receive also the love. When you see him as Father, you receive fear and love. And you need both in order to have a right relationship with God. Both fear, a holy reverence, and love. And to know he loves you back. He loves you so much that he sent his only son, that he would die for your sins, and in the sins of everyone else in the world. See, that's true love. And when you see him as a father and you get what he released into Israel, you really understand who God of the Bible is. Now, what we see here is this descendant of King Agag, who already hated Israel, but now has a chip on his shoulder because everybody else from the kingdom died. Now, Samuel eventually does cut off Agag's head. To say, how does this happen? How is Haman a descendant of Agag when Agag's head was cut off by Samuel? Saul didn't kill him. Samuel killed him. Well, some of his descendants survived. People say his wife survived. Maybe there was a child that was already born that survived. But either way, descendants of Agag survived because Saul was not thorough in killing all the Amalekites. Haman is a descendant of Agag with a tremendous chip on his shoulder and a hatred for Jews. Now, hatred for Jews is hatred to God of the Jews. And this is what we see happening with Haman. There's a disdain for the God of the Bible. There cannot be a hatred of Jews and a love of the God of the Bible. Because the God of the Bible is the God of the Jews. He set apart Israel to bring that truth to the world. You can't hate Jews and love God. It's not possible. And so this is what we see with Haman. By making himself an enemy of the Jews in this Bible, he makes himself an enemy of God. Very important to understand this. And we see enemies of Israel rising up all over the world. Anti-Semitism is increasing. In the United States, it's up by 40%. In Germany, it's up by 70%. In France, it's up by 90%. Anti-Semitism has increased in staggering rates recently. Among groups that, like I said, I never thought I'd see it among. Hebrew Israelites literally massacring Jews on Hanukkah in markets in the United States. Terrible. That is not the will of God. And we can see very clearly that anyone who has this heart is against the God of the Bible. You can't say you love God and you hate the Jews. Now, this is very important that we get this because, God has sent Jews all over the world. Jews are a part of every culture now. There's no culture that doesn't have Jews mixed in with it at this point. So you can't really hate anybody because we're all mixed at this point. All over the world, we're all mixed. We got all types of stuff in us. Esther is in Persia. Her name was Hadassah. She's in Persia. She is a Jew. She has Jewish identity. She's from the tribe of Benjamin, the same tribe of King Saul. But she's been caught up in palace life and put in her place because her predecessor, Vashti, was too bold in front of the king. Vashti refused to come before the king when he asked for her. So the king is being, made it very clear that, listen, my next wife is going to have to be submitted to me. She's going to be very submissive, not get out of line. Otherwise, I'll have to do the same thing to her that I did to Vashti, or even worse, because I got to keep order in my kingdom. And so this is what she's coming into. And so there is some fear there. Yes, this is her husband, but it's not like marriage we see, in the Western world nowadays. This man has hundreds of wives. And when Mordecai comes to Esther to tell her, he actually sends a message to Esther that Haman has released an edict signed or sealed with the king's own signet ring, because as Haman has been growing in influence, the king gives Haman his signet ring. Haman then seals this edict to destroy all of the Jews on the 12th day of the month of Adar. We'll talk about that in a minute. So what happens is Mordecai starts to mourn at the king's gate, and he sends a message into Esther. Because no one who's mourning can actually go into the palace or into the palace courts or courtyard. So he's at the gate mourning. He sends a message to Esther for her to stand up on behalf of her people. This is in Esther chapter 4, starting in verse 13. Because she says to him, he asks her to take a stand, go to the king on behalf of the Jews who are going to be annihilated on the 12th day of Adar, which is a biblical month. It's the last month of the biblical calendar. She tells him, listen, starting verse 11, all the king's officials as well as the people in the royal palace know that if anyone, man or woman, approaches the king in the inner courtyard without being summoned, there is just one law. He must be put to death. Unless the king holds out the gold scepter for him to remain alive. And I haven't been summoned to the king for the past 30 days, which means this is her husband, but she hasn't seen him in a month. And he's right there in the palace with her. And she hasn't seen him in a month, which means that he's, sleeping with the other women in the harem. He's doing, work to prepare for this war. He's trying to stage on Greece. All types of stuff is happening at this point. And she is not very involved in the life of the king. So she doesn't have that closeness of a wife that most of us would think of at this point. She's one of many. She has more of an authority than the others in the harem because she's queen, but she doesn't have this intimacy that we would imagine most marriages would have. Okay. So she's like, I can't approach him. He has to request for me to come. I can't just approach him or he can have me put to death. This is Mordecai's answer to her. Verse 13. Don't suppose that merely because you happen to be in the royal palace, you will escape any more than the other Jews. For if you fail to speak up now, relief and deliverance will come to the Jews from a different direction, but you and your father's family will perish. Who knows whether you didn't come into your royal position precisely for such a time as this? That is the message to the body of believers right now. Now, whether you are ethnically Jewish, like you got some Jewish blood in you, or whether you're completely Gentile, you don't know that you have any Jewish blood in you. Like I said, we've been so mixed over the years, and Israel has been sent to exile all over the world. You might have Israelite or Jewish blood in you. You don't know. DNA test will tell you. But either way, if you've been raised Gentile, you've been raised in a pagan household, you're a Gentile. If you come into faith with the God of the Bible, that is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of Israel, Ephesians chapter 2 says that you are now a citizen of the Commonwealth of Israel, which means that you are a Jew. Let's go to Ephesians chapter 2. And this is very important as we identify the body of believers, particularly the church, with Esther. Let's go to Ephesians chapter 2. And I like the way it reads in the Complete Jewish. He's talking about the Gentiles who are far off, the Jews who are brought near, all of which are a part of the body of believers now. Okay? So starting in verse 11, it says, therefore remember your former state, you Gentiles by birth, called the uncircumcised, by those who merely because of an operation in their flesh are called the circumcised. At that time, you had no Messiah. You were estranged from the national life of Israel. You were foreigners to the covenants embodying God's promise. You were in this world without hope and without God. That was verses 11 and 12. Now he says that Yeshua has broken down the dividing line between Jew and Gentile, the religious wall of separation called a mechitza. He broke it down with his own blood, with his own sacrifice, with his own body, making from the two groups, Jew and Gentile, one new man, one flesh. We are all one in the Messiah. Very important. He made shalom between us, which is peace, rest, and wholeness, making us one, making us whole. Literally, Gentiles and Jews complete each other. Very important that you get that. Now, he tells us in verse 19, so then you are no longer foreigners and strangers. On the contrary, you are fellow citizens with God's people and members of God's family. Fellow citizens in the Commonwealth of Israel. Like, this is so important that we get that, because as you look at being citizens with God's people, that you're being members of God's family, that you are actually a part of Israel with all of the same spiritual connections to Israel, the identity of Israel, if you're actually reading and adhering to the Bible as I teach it in the Word Revealed. That's why I do that discipleship study, that life study, because we've got to be students of the Bible, the actual Bible, not the religion that was created to distance the body of believers from Israel. I'm talking about grafted into Israel, according to Romans chapter 11, Gentiles and Jews being one in Messiah, as we see here in Ephesians chapter 2. And the very last verse, he says, in union with him, you yourselves are being built together into a spiritual dwelling place for God. Literally, Jew and Gentile one in Messiah is the place where God dwells in our unity. I've been talking about that a lot lately. Now, if you get that, then that means the bride of Messiah is distinctly Jewish. Distinctly Jewish. She's not Roman. She's not Greek. She's not English. She's not European in any way. She's not American. She is distinctly Jewish. Because Yeshua is Jewish. He still is Jewish. There's so much propaganda out now trying to erase Yeshua's Jewish identity, but it didn't just start. It started 1700 years ago in the 4th century through Constantine, Emperor Constantine, the Roman emperor. He tried to erase everything Jewish out of the body of believers at the Council of Nicaea. He was literally doing what Jeroboam did when he established the 2 golden calves. He was trying to secure his empire. He said, I can't stand to hear the Jews boast that we can't keep the feast, the Passover, without them. They don't have the answer in this question. We will establish Easter. Now, Easter had already been established. It was the fertility festival of Ishtar, when she was believed to be reunited with Tammuz, the springtime god, and they were supposed to be mating during the springtime, hence the chicks and the bunnies. It's a fertility festival. And it's believed that Tammuz came back to life from the underworld. This is why the leaves The trees come back and the flowers bloom because Tammuz has come back to life. So it is believed that there's a resurrection. Tammuz is going to be an anti-Messiah. So Constantine says we're not going to celebrate Passover because I want to hear the Jews say that we got to learn it from them. We're going to celebrate Easter, which we already know. We're going to say that Easter is about Jesus' resurrection. So we got to change his name. Yeshua is too Jewish. We got to call him Jesus, which is Roman. Jesus is Greek. Jesus is Roman. You got to call him Jesus because it's Roman. We're going to say that the festival of Easter is about him. He's resurrected instead of Tammuz, but it's him. Tammuz is him. He's being resurrected. That's what we're going to say. And we know how to observe Easter. It's going to be the resurrection festival of Jesus. It's a fertility festival wherein babies were sacrificed to Ishtar and Tammuz, and eggs were dipped in the baby's blood, hence the dying of the eggs. And eggs were set on the windowsill to show how many babies were sacrificed to Tammuz and Ishtar. Horrible tradition that has made its way into the church. That's why you don't see it in the Bible, because it is despicable to God. It's detestable to God. Now, what's important for us to understand about this is that, like I said, Constantine did the same thing Jeroboam did. When the kingdom split, Jeroboam was afraid that the northern kingdom was going to go back down to the temple and worship God the way God ordained for them to worship. So he creates a whole new system of religion. The 2 golden calves in Dan and Bethel, and he says, these are your gods that brought you out of Egypt. Constantine created a whole new religion as well. He says, Yeshua didn't save you. He's not a Jew. It's Jesus. We already know him. And everything that had Tammuz in it, things that had Baal in it, Jesus was put into it. This is why we see Christmas coming up, because there's Baal worship that happens during Christmas, during that Christmas season, the winter solstice, Saturnalia, Baal worship, all type of stuff is all smushed together. We're going to say that's for Jesus too. This is what happens, and the whole faith, Christianity, is completely shifted to preserve the Roman Empire. That was the motive. It didn't have anything to do with worshiping God or loving the Lord, and it was in its nature anti-Jewish. So in that way, the church has come to a prominent position. Now the church comes into the court of the king, who is Constantine. He's the emperor of the world. And he says, I'm going to favor Christians now, because emperors before him were burning Christians on stakes, throwing them into the circus, which sounds nice because we think of Barnum and Bailey, but the circus back then was in the Colosseum, and wild beasts like lions were released, and then people were thrown out there, and people watched the lions eat them. That was the circus. Christians were thrown into those places. This is what the Roman emperors prior to Constantine was doing. And so Constantine says, I'm going to favor Christians, but in the way that I am establishing this religion for preservation of the empire. So everybody's going to become one. So everything that was already worshipped, all religious practices that were already happening in Rome, all came together in this disgusting syncretism to create Christianity. And Christianity became the religion of the empire. But it included worship that everybody else did. North Africans, Europeans, everybody's worship. All the worship of the land all came together into what became Christianity. So now the church has an audience with the king, who's Constantine. But she has forgotten who she is. When the body of believers receives his favor with Constantine, he threatens anyone who wants to continue to do this Jewish stuff and opposes what I'm saying, your head is going to be cut off. And in fact, he did cut off heads of Christian bishops and Jewish apostles, beheaded in the 4th century, because they opposed this shift to paganism and calling it Christianity. Everyone else that remained is now fearing for their lives and wanting peace. So what they do is they compromise. They go forward with the king, forgetting their Jewish identity. And the church, for 1700 years, then begins persecuting Jews all over the world. Spanish Inquisition, the liberation of Jerusalem, the Crusades, all types of stuff, even leading up to the Holocaust. All of it Christian-led. Very important we understand this, because in this season, the Lord is calling the bride to awaken and remember her Jewish identity. To remember that it was the fear of this Emperor Constantine that caused her to forsake her Jewish identity. And to now step forward as a Jew, I'm talking to the church, to step forward as a Jew and say, my people are about to be annihilated. And I'm coming before you. These are government leaders, political leaders, demons who are principalities that are at work behind the scenes. But more importantly, go before the king on the throne in heaven. I am coming before you. I am the queen. I am the bride. And I am a Jew. And I am coming on behalf of my people Israel, who are being attacked worldwide right now. Now, when the church remembers that identity, that she is Hadassah, not Esther, that she is Jewish, not Persian, still a queen, but a Jewish queen awaiting her Messiah. When we remember that, when we reveal our identity, as you see Esther doing it, she goes before the king in chapter 6, and Haman's plot is revealed, right? And then it continues, chapter 6, chapter 5, chapter 6. We see chapter 7, all of it is revealed. That Haman wants to kill all the Jews. Esther is a Jew. The king then allows Esther to bring in Mordecai. Mordecai then writes a new edict so that all the Jews can rise up and defend themselves with the king's backing. Very important that that's understood, because, of course the Jews were going to try to defend themselves, but the kingdom was on the side of Haman, the Agagite, who was descended from the Amalekites, who hate the Jews. But when the plot of Haman was revealed to the king has Haman killed. He takes the signet ring off of Haman's hand, puts it on Mordecai's hand. Of course, we know as a Jew, everybody knew he was a Jew. He writes an edict saying that the Jews can stand up and defend themselves on the 12th day of Adar, the day that was meant for their destruction. And the king's army actually supports the Jews, as opposed to supporting those who wanted to kill the Jews. People realized that they should not attack these Jews and literally become Jews. It actually says that people became Jews because of fear of Jews. Like, this is important that we get that, because it says right here in verse 17 of Esther chapter 8, in every province and city where the king's order and decree arrived, that's the one that Mordecai wrote, and he stamped it with the king's signet ring. The Jews had gladness and joy, a feast and a holiday. See, this is where Purim is going to be established. Many from the peoples of the land became Jews because fear of the Jews had overcome them. Now, a fear of the Jews is a fear of your day. Very important that you understand that. The fact that they're fearing the Jews is because they realize God is with them. Now, God is not mentioned anywhere in the book of Esther. There's another reason why we wear costumes on Purim, because even God's identity is hidden in the book of Esther, though we know he is completely behind the scenes orchestrating everything, because it came together perfectly. Humans are not that smart. Esther, after receiving that letter from Mordecai, message from Mordecai saying you need to go before the king, and if you don't, you and your father's family will perish. And she responds back, I will do it. I'm going to fast for 3 days. And if I perish, I perish. When she responds, they fast for 3 days. While that's happening, the king remembers that Mordecai saved his life. The king honors Mordecai, has Haman do it publicly, honor Mordecai, a Jew, and Haman was trying to kill Mordecai because Mordecai wouldn't bow down to him. Now Esther has this banquet, and she requires the king and Haman to come. All of this happens so that the king will be favorably disposed toward his bride and save the Jews. All that's God, but God is not mentioned in this book at all. But we know it's the Lord. This is another reason why the identity is hidden on Purim, and we have this festival with the costumes, because Esther's identity is hidden, but then revealed. And God's hand at work in the whole book of Esther, like everything that's going on, is hidden and then revealed. So this is why traditionally costumes are worn during Purim. Of course, it's biblical costumes, nothing evil, nothing demonic. Very important that we get that. But what we see happening here is that there's literally not just joy and feasting for Israel, because this is why we have Purim on the next days, the 13th to 14th days of Adar. Which the 13th day of Adar actually starts Sunday this year on the 8th, going to the 9th. And then the 14th day of Adar goes from Monday the 9th going into the 10th. When you're in Israel, people celebrate it often on the 13th day of Adar, going from the 8th of March to the 9th. But when you're outside the land, when you're in exile, you celebrate it on the 14th day of Adar, like they did in Susa, which was the capital city in Persia, which is going to be from March 9th to March 10th. Very interesting. You'll see that actually in the scripture as well. But the point is, no matter which days that you observe it, it is a time of feasting and celebrating for Jews who were about to be annihilated, and then God stepped in. However, what we also see that I just shared with you in chapter 18, verse 17, is that there's a harvest of souls as well. People who become Jews because of the fear of the Jews. And remember what I said, fear of the Jews is the fear of Yahweh, the God of the Jews. And the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. So literally people are coming into faith because they realize he's the true God. If he could do this for these people, turn this situation around so drastically for them, he's the true God. And so it witnesses to the power of God. Now, when you look at the actions of Christians over the years, the Crusades, Spanish Inquisition, that does not witness to the power of God. It was terrible atrocities and terror against all type of peoples, but the Jews being the focal point. Same thing with the Holocaust. There were more than just Jews that were killed in the Holocaust. Blacks and gypsies, infirmed people, elderly, homosexuals, all type of people were killed during the Holocaust. But the focal point was the Jews. And this is very important that we get that, because when we see these terrible atrocities happening, this terror happening, the first group the enemy wants to attack is the Jews, and then everybody else. And so it becomes very important that the fear of Yahweh come upon all of us, that we would realize that we're believers, that like Esther, we actually are Jews, we're Hadassah. And there was an assignment that we had. See, Esther's ancestor, Saul, didn't complete his assignment. He didn't destroy the Amalekites, who were marauding terrorists, just killing people at random who were weak and infirm. Any door open that they saw, they were killing and raiding and pillaging and kidnapping. This is what the Amalekites did. When Saul did not completely destroy them, he actually released that spirit to do even more damage. And this is what we see Haman doing in the book of Esther. This is what we see in 1 Samuel chapter 30, when they take all of David's family, all of his men's families, and destroy the village in Ziklag. We see the Amalekites continuing to just do more and more and more and more when Saul does not complete the work, when he does not do the work that God is calling him to do. Now, that work is a commandment in Deuteronomy chapter 25, which I just read. Blot out the name of Amalek because he has done violence to Israel. That is a commandment to us because we are Israel. Like I said, it doesn't matter if you're ethnically or not ethnically Israel. If you are a part of the body of believers, which means the bride of Messiah who is Jewish, you're Jewish. That's it. You're Israel. It is commanded that you blot out Amalek. Amalek meaning terrorists who hate God's people. You don't become one of them, which is exactly what the church did. The church actually took on the spirit of Amalek rather than getting rid of Amalek. Now, I want to show you something because that happened to Saul as well. Here in 1 Samuel chapter 15, Saul, remember, he does not kill Agag, the king of the Amalekites. And we know from 1 Samuel chapter 30, there was more Amalekites because those are the ones who tracked down David. But listen to this. When Saul does not kill the Amalekites, the spirit of God departs from him, and an evil spirit comes and starts to agitate and upset him. But look at what he does. He starts to become afraid of David. He starts trying to take out David in 1 Samuel chapter 18, 1 Samuel chapter 19. He's trying to kill David. David finally runs away. And guess what Saul does? Saul kills an entire town of priests, Jewish priests, in 1 Samuel chapter 21. He comes, well, actually, David is in that town. He's seen in that town, and because the priest to help David out. Saul shows up in 1 Samuel chapter 22, starting in verse 6, and all the way through the end of that chapter, he kills the entire town of priests, Jewish priests, men of God. Why? Because he did not destroy Amalek, so the spirit of Amalek came into him. So he starts to terrorize even his own people. He started to terrorize. I'm talking towns full of people. Saul becomes a terror against even his own people. When we refuse to take up God's mission to be his hand of judgment and blot out the name of Amalek, we open ourselves up to receive the spirit of Amalek, which will always want to destroy the things of God and the people of God. And so I'm going to tell you right now that the call to the body of believers in this season is to take up the spirit of Esther, to take up the spirit of Mordecai, to recognize your Jewish identity, to stand with Israel, connect back with the Hebrew roots of the faith, and blot out the memory of Amalek. Let me tell you how we blot out the memory of Amalek. Because the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations, and every high thing that will exalt itself against the knowledge of Messiah. We got to go to war in the spirit. We have to war in the spirit against this spirit of Amalek that seeks to destroy Israel, the things of God, and the people of God. Let me explain something to you. If you are an on fire, Bible believing Christian, those who hate the Jews, as soon as they do much damage as they think they can do, the next group they're coming to is you. If you stay on fire for the Lord, if you don't commit to their cause, if you don't compromise with them, they'll hate the Jews first, because you don't see yourself as a Jew. You're a Christian. They'll hate the Jews first. They'll come for the Jews. And then they're going to turn their sights right on you. This was the message to Esther. Listen to this. Chapter 4. Remember what Mordecai said to her in verses 13 and 14. Don't suppose that merely because you happen to be in the royal palace, you will escape any more than any of the other Jews. See, the church doesn't have to remember that we're Jews. We don't have to accept that we're Jews. But the reality is we are. Is it just because you're trying to forget and you think you're in the palace now that you're not Jewish anymore? You still are. Don't think you forget. Don't get twisted. Just because you don't want to claim your Jewish identity and heritage, that you come from that tree, you still are. And you won't escape when Amalek comes after the Jews. You won't escape. Watch this. Verse 14, for if you fail to speak up now, relief and deliverance will come to the Jews from a different direction. Somebody else is going to raise up on behalf of Israel. Why? Because Israel has to call Messiah back. Yeshua said, you will not see me here again until you cry, Baruch haba Adonai. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. This is why the Lord allowed the body of believers in the first century to be scattered all over the world. Because if they had evangelized all of Israel, Yeshua would have just come back. Gentiles never had an opportunity to come in. The body is scattered out of Israel. Israel receives a blindness in part, is what Paul says in Romans chapter 11. Why? So Gentiles can come in. And now that almost all of the world has been fully evangelized, meaning the world has received the gospel, even if it wasn't the gospel of Yeshua, they received the gospel of Jesus at least. Everybody's heard about it. Now Jews are coming back in, and the blindness is removed from Jews. So now everybody is coming back into the fold. Remember, it's always been his plan that there will be both Jews and Gentiles. Always. The Lord was always coming after everybody. That was always his plan. Different roles, but the same God loves us all. Now, look, watch this. Remember, if you fail to speak up now on behalf of Israel, relief and deliverance will come to the Jews from a different direction. God will raise somebody up to speak up on behalf of Israel. He will never allow Israel to be completely annihilated, because Israel has to call back Messiah Yeshua. He comes back for Israel. He comes back to Israel. Read Zechariah chapter 14 if you don't believe it. Listen, the relief and deliverance will come to the Jews from a different direction, but you and your father's family will perish. Remember what I told you? They come for the Jews. You don't stand up for the Jews, they can come for you. And God will deliver the Jews who realize that they're Jews. But because you broke in faith with God, denied your true identity and the roots of the culture he created the Israelite culture. Abraham was from Babylon. He created the Israelite culture from Abraham. This is the people he set apart for himself. You forget that identity, Amalek will still come to destroy you. The spirit is still going to come. Why? Because you also are a son of Abraham. You're a daughter of the father of the faith. So Amalek hates you too. That spirit hates you too. So you can't let it use you because it will destroy you. Watch this. But who knows whether you come into your royal position precisely for such a time as this. Gentiles, since the first century, have always outnumbered Jews in the body of believers. But that was a royal position that God put the church in, to be able to speak on behalf of Israel, the minority in the world, to be able to stand up, to get into places of influence, to get into places of spiritual influence and prayer and the Holy Spirit. See, we'll pray in the Spirit now. Come on. There are things we've got to do that will secure the kingdom. It's not about Israel. It's actually about the kingdom of God. The question is, will you allow him to raise you up as an Esther? Will you understand that there's a call to the body of believers this Purim that we have got to do? And the Lord's been saying this for years. I'll tell you right now, this is not a new message. He's been saying it for years. I've heard it, maybe the first time I heard this, the guy was calling for an Esther church maybe 10 years ago. It's been a long time. He's been saying it for years. However, in this season, we either say yes, or I'm telling you, Amalek is coming. And what I mean by that is that because anti-Semitism is rising, it will also come after the body of believers. And we see it happening. Christians are becoming the bad guys all over the place. It's the same spirit of Amalek. It's the same spirit of Amalek. Why is it now coming for us? We haven't stood for Israel the way we ought to. It's the same spirit. You got to take that spirit out. We got to address that terrorist spirit that wants to destroy the people of God. And it has to start first with Israel. And let me tell you a beautiful spiritual way that you do that is by identifying. First thing you do is you reveal your Jewish identity. You identify with Israel. You cannot replace Israel, no matter what your spiritual heritage. Even if you got Jewish blood or Israelite blood, if you don't have Israelite blood, you can't replace Israel. You can't say that there's no Europeans that are Israelites. You can't say the Jews in the land, none of them are real Jews. See, that is the spirit of Amalek that replaces Israel. You got to be one with Israel, all of Israel. Remember, what's in Israel all over the world? There are Asian Jews, there's African Jews, there's European Jews, there's Native American Jews. Jews are all over the world. You can't say one group isn't Jewish because you got a problem with those people. Can't do it. You got to identify with Israel, all of Israel, no matter what color Israel looks like at this point, because Israel's been dispersed all over the world. You got to identify with all of Israel. When you stand up, when you identify with all of Israel, you're approaching the king in heaven like Esther did. He will release the scepter to you, and he will listen to your prayers, and then he will defend your people, all of Israel, which is going to include Jews in the land, Jews in the diaspora, and the body of believers, the church, the Messianic community, all over the world. God will rise up, but he's not going to rise up when you're only praying for your little group because you hate the other group. Because what he hears in those prayers is the spirit of Amalek, and he hates Amalek. We just read it in Deuteronomy 25. He hates Amalek. So if you hate another group of people that he calls his spirit of Amalek is at work in you, and God is not hearing your prayers, he needs you to identify with his kingdom, with his people, all of his people. And then you are the bride. Then you are the queen. You win his favor. You can approach his throne. He will release the scepter, and he'll hear your petition. And he will grant your request. This is what happens to Esther. This is what Purim is all about. And in this season, I'm telling you, like I told you, I've been hearing the Esther Church Arise message for 10 years now. And I'm certainly not the first person to minister it. Like I said, I've been hearing it for 10 years now. But what he's telling me to say right now, prophetically, is that in this season, either we rise up as Esther or we're destroyed. Like Esther chapter 4, verses 13 and 14 have never been more real, more applicable, and more timely for the mighty believers. So you got to rise up. Make sure you join us on Friday. The truth is we're going to have great fun. Like it's amazing fun. We go through, the story of Esther and all of it, and everybody's interactive, and some people have noisemakers and stuff, and people wearing costumes. It's a great big party in the service. Wonderful time. There's also wonderful worship. There's going to be wonderful exhortation. There will also be an opportunity for you to rise up as an Esther. It'll be an opportunity for you to say, I am Hadassah. I'm Jewish. I am the bride of Messiah, the Jewish Messiah. Israel is my people. And we will come before the king together. That is the very first thing you got to do in kingdom alignment. Then after that, after we become one in that way, we're going to honor the gifts in the body, all over the body. That's what we'll do on Saturday. We're going to spend some good time looking at that and the keys to revival. But I can't even minister that message. I cannot share the keys to revival. I cannot honor the gifts in the body until we come together and we are a body. That's why we've got to come together on Friday night, 7:30 p.m. at Congregation Zion's Sake, which is at World Outreach Worship Center, 1233 Shields Road, Newport News, Virginia. Go to truthinspirit.org and just scroll down, click on Ecclesia 2020 for all the information you need. Then join us again on Saturday, March 7th at 10 a.m. Very important. 10 a.m. We have our first session. We'll have lunch on site for those who've already pre-registered. Pre-registration is closed now, though. So if you didn't pre-register, you have to have lunch off-site. Come back for our session at 1. Because honestly, it all is going to go together. You need all three parts: Friday night, Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon. If you miss any one of those, you're going to miss out. I'm telling you right now, it all goes together into what God is doing. He's got an amazing impartation. He's got an amazing transformation. He's got an amazing word and revelation that he's trying to give us this weekend. But you got to be present for it. So please plan to join us. If you have any questions, email me at info@truthinspirit.org. But be sure that you stand up to be united with your people. You've got to be, because in this season, everything is depending on it. We are the generation who calls Messiah back. We got to be in position. We got to be his bride to do it. I pray that blessed you. I do hope that we'll see you. For those who are so called to partner with us, Ecclesia 2020 is a free event. Even for the pre-registration, it was free. The lunch is free for those who've already pre-registered. Everything we're doing is free. So if you've been called to support us financially as we do this event, because it is costly for us, certainly do so online. Go to truthinspirit.org. Just go to the giving page. You can give online right now, and it will go toward our Ecclesia 2020 preparations. So we've still got some more to do these last few days. But I'm so looking forward to seeing you guys. God is going to do a great work. Invite people. Share this video. Share the Ecclesia 2020 video that's on our Facebook page. Let people know that it's coming, and let them know that this is the time for us to really be the bride that God has called us to be. We got to come out of hiding. We got to stop pretending to be Babylonian or Persian or Roman or Greek. And we got to be the Jewish bride to the Jewish Messiah. Naturally part of the tree, natural branches, or even wild branches grafted in, it doesn't matter. If you're the bride, if you're a believer, if you're part of the household of faith, if you're God's son or daughter, you are the Jewish bride. And you got to connect with it. You got to reveal that identity so the Messiah can be called back and his people Israel may be saved. I pray I bless you. I look forward to seeing you soon. I know God is going to change everything from this time going forward. So make sure you don't miss it. Be blessed.